everyone. I think we can start. Maybe if you can enlighten me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first collective inquiry session on cultivating conscious local communities and cultures for regeneration. So this is an event that is organized by both our Conscious Food Systems Alliance and our FACS, Food and Agriculture Commodity Systems Community. This is convened by UNDP. I'm Thomas Legrand, and I'm the lead technical advisor for the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. I'll be introducing this session, and at some point I will let my colleague Charlotte Dufour facilitate the session because I'm currently traveling in India and my connection is not so good. So we are very pleased to convene this event. Our Conscious Food Systems Alliance has been launched at the end of last year. We are focusing on the cultivation of inner capacities for regenerative food systems, and we have identified different areas of intervention, different entry points in the food systems from production to consumption. We have identified different entry points for we have decided to explore these different entry points through collective inquiries, and this one is the first of them. This event is not intended to be an isolated one-off event, but rather the starting point for a conversation on how we can work together on this area of intervention. Indeed, after this event, we will create on our COFSA digital platform that you can access as members and action groups where participants can continue to work together, to exchange information and start collaborating. We will also, while we expect there will be some self-organization, we will also help organize a few more sessions, in-depth sessions, to go deeper with our speakers today, to go deeper into their work, to understand more their experience, their methodologies, the results they have been achieving, etc. So going more technical later on in these in-depth sessions. So the focus of these collective inquiries is really to get to know more, especially existing and tested initiatives and methodologies. So today, this session will explore how to help cultivate conscious and regenerative mindsets, values, and cultures, which we think are key to support the adoption of regenerative agriculture practices. So we will have an exciting panel today with three speakers. Tali Bogale, Co-Chief Executive Officer at Gaia Education. We'll have Genzo Yamamoto, Director of Knowledge Management at Opportunity International, and Pavel Senkel, Head of Schumacher College and Director of Learning at Dartington Trust. So they will share with us their experiences and knowledge on existing and tested initiatives and methodologies that are proven to be successful in helping local communities to embrace the regenerative cultures. So after the panel of 30 minutes, we'll have a space for breakout in small groups for you to end up with some updates on upcoming COFSA events. So, but before we go to the panel, we will start with a short centering practice led by Jan Teixeira from the Gaia Education team. He's an e-learning associate at within the Gaia Education team. So over to you. Sergio.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah. I have a good friend named Sergio Teixeira. That's why I just over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm Jan. I'm speaking from South Brazil, and I'm part of Gaia Education, which Sally will share a little bit more later. So for now, I'll invite you to do grounding. And for that, I invite you to just find a comfortable position where you can feel relaxed and just present in this moment. And if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. Otherwise, you can just focus your attention on a point that you feel good and relaxed. And as you find yourself in a good position, comfortable, I invite you to connect with your breath. Just notice whether it's fast or too slow. And be aware of this amazing mechanism we have. And as you breathe in and breathe out, notice that you are exchanging with your environment. You are receiving and giving back. Receiving and giving back. And notice your body. Make a quick scan through from the head to your feet. And once you get to the feet, if they are on the ground, if they're not, you can just imagine. But if your feet are on the ground, you just notice that you are also exchanged with the ground beneath you. Acknowledge this exchange. And I'm going to invite you to a quick journey with me. Imagine that you are in the forest. And it's a very welcoming forest. You feel comfortable. Make sure you are shoes off. You are barefoot. Just so you can feel everything around you. Feel the air. Feel the ground beneath you. And as you enter the forest, start asking permission. To be there. And start walking. Notice whatever gets your attention. It's an animal, a rock, or a plant. And as you are walking, you will notice a beautiful tree. This tree somehow gets your attention and you start connecting. You look to that tree And again, you can ask permission and start touching it or even just looking at it. You can feel the textures. You can look at the leaves. And as you build a starting point connection, I invite you to ask something to that tree. I invite you to ask, what community is that tree part of? And just be aware of the answer. The tree can talk to you, or even you can just look around and find the answers yourself. In what ways that community is in synchrony with that space? In what ways they give back to that space, and in what ways they receive? And as you notice all this information that you gather from the forest, I invite you to say thanks to that tree for this moment and for this learning. And just slowly start coming back to your body and noticing your breath again. Notice if it's faster or slower. And when you feel ready, I invite you to open your eyes again and be present for the coming session that we have together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Thank you. And greetings. Your visualization feels very, very timely. The nature around me in Burgundy is full of regenerative energy. We see all the light green leaves about to burst into full maturity. And the ash tree that was speaking to me when I asked him, what community are you part of? Said, can I be part of KOFSA? So I think we can be aware of all those other than human beings that are part of our own communities that can enrich our exchanges here in this space. I'm delighted to be with all of you, to see some familiar names and some less familiar names on our screens. And I think we will be giving and receiving a lot in this hour and 10 minutes that we have left together. And we'll be starting by receiving from our speakers, whom Thomas introduced, starting with Sally. Ladies first. Sally, can you tell us your story of regeneration, how you're living it, how you're sharing it, in particular through the Gaia Education Eco-Village Design education programs, in the aspects that feel relevant for our work on conscious food systems here in KOPSTA.
Thank you, Charlotte. And hi, everybody. It's lovely to be here today. And thank you, Jan. That grounding exercise was just perfect for me. Yes, a more personal journey into why I'm working with Gaia Education and my life in relation to moving towards regenerative cultures. It feels like such a warming subject that we don't often get asked. And when I think about the pivotal moment in my life that led me to work for Gaia Education, I go immediately back to 2002 to 2004, when I went out to Rwanda to teach English at a secondary school with the voluntary service overseas in my 20s. And coming from Devon in England, I had quite a sheltered and comfortable life, and I thought I was going to go out and help out a little bit and then go home to my old life again. And luckily for me, that's not what happened at all. I got hit by the reality of what's going on in the world. It was 8 years after the genocide, and I had no idea about the colonial effects on East Africa that had happened and how they'd contributed to the genocide and globalization and the effect that rampant consumerism and the globalization effect was having on the world. And I basically had a shattering of my worldview. And it was a very difficult situation for me internally. And I felt like I couldn't go home. And I did try to be of service in the International Committee of the Red Cross for a few years. But basically, I found my way to Fintorn Eco Village in the north of Scotland because I was looking for how could a Western community find a way to live in a way that is within planetary boundaries, in harmony, and contributing to the planet rather than degrading it. And Fintorn Eco Village was part of the Global Eco Village Network. And I originally came in my 20s, and then I came back again in 2012 with my husband, now husband. We married here, and we've got a 7-year-old daughter now. So we've been here for about 13 years. And I've worked for various organizations here and started at Gaia Education in 2016. And I find that Gaia, let me explain a bit about Gaia Education, because to me, it was the answer I was looking for as somebody who could see the crisis that we're facing and needed support and a joyous and happy view and route towards what the human presence could be on Earth. And Gaia Education was created out of the Global Eco Village Network, where the educators of that network were asked more and more to help other people learn how to create more regenerative practices in their own communities, even if they weren't eco villages. And so they created the Eco Village Design Education curriculum. And what they did that feels really significant for me, given the story I've told you, was they took the conventional 3 pillars of economic, social, and ecological sustainability, and they added to it the worldview dimension. So we have a 4-dimensional mandala that is the framework of all our trainings. And this worldview dimension is our core, essential, the fabric of what we do, because as Kofsa talks about, we feel also that if people do not experience a shift in worldview, then the other dimensions of sustainability will never be shifted, because the internal journey has to happen first. And the internal journey can be very different depending on where anyone is in the world, but it's essentially connecting to ourselves, connecting to each other, and connecting to the ecosystem that we are very much part of. And so the Eco Village Design Education Program, or the EDE, the flagship program, is a 4-week program covering these 4 dimensions. And then along it runs a design studio where participants can go anywhere in the world to a different eco village or learning center, whoever's holding it. And it's a transformational journey looking, and maybe Noemi can show that the picture of the mandala, that would be great. And yeah, so it takes you through that journey of looking how different organizations, different people, different eco-villages are looking at how to reconnect, and then how to reconnect socially, and then how to reconnect ecologically and economically. And it breaks those modules down into different subjects that I won't go into detail in here, but you can easily find this mandala on our website, and Kofsa also has our curriculum that's freely downloadable for you if you want to see it. And going through that process, and at the same time in teams working on a design project for a result at the end, where they've got a design for maybe and maybe you could show the next picture now, Noemi, of examples of design projects. So There's people who've done an educational experiential agricultural park that they've designed, or a green marketplace that they've designed, or belonging to a place and with rituals and ceremony. And this program has proven so transformational to people that it really has made change makers around the world. And I've been asked to focus more here, obviously, on food and agriculture, although I could also show you socially transformational, worldview transformational projects that people are doing all across our networks. But there were three I just wanted to mention in particular. So the first one is just to quickly mention, this is a typical example of when someone's done one of our face-to-face EDE programs. If you could just show the next slide, Noemi. This is what happened to Sarah in Norway. She only did an EDE in 2019 in Glarisegg in Switzerland. And it moved her so deeply in, oh my goodness, I have to reconnect here and work out what's going on with my food systems and agriculture. And it led her very quickly with her partner to a journey of setting up their own regenerative farm. And they're on their journey now there to becoming self-sustaining. That's the journey they decided to go down with it. So that's on a very, very personal scale. And then, for example, on the next on the next scale, maybe we could look at Om's project, Om and Tom's project in Thailand. Now, Om, I remember meeting her nearly 10 years ago when she was one of the younger members of the Global Eco Village Network. And she did the EDE. And she said that it felt like coming home because she'd grown up in a Thai very small village, very isolated, but very interconnected and connected to nature. And growing up and moving out in the world, she couldn't find that anywhere. And then suddenly the EDE was speaking what she was feeling. So after teaching with Tom for a few years, they actually created Gaia Ashram in Thailand. And that is, it's got 6.5 hectares, and they're trying to demonstrate to local farmers permaculture farming and how you can earn a living. You can see that there's a shop that they're gradually increasing produce in with food and cleansing products and essential oils. They're really trying to show how marketable that is. And of course, worldview is an essential part of what Om and Tom are doing. Om spent 8 years in an ashrams, and her approach is yoga and meditation. That's the way that she's gone with it. And they have about 5 people living there as core staff, but loads of volunteers and people passing through all the time. And as you can see, it's a beautiful place. And then I'll give you one more example of how the EDEs, when they're extended out into project-based learning programs, which we also do. And just to mention, we also do online programs as well, because we've translated the EDE into a long-term design for sustainability program that people can do online as well. But this is a project-based learning program that we did with WWF Zambia and the Young Emerging Farmers Initiative, working with 500 young people in a really difficult area of central province in Zambia, supporting young people to shift their internal worldview into a sense of feeling empowered, feeling that they can be connected to their local environment, they can be connected to what they want to do in their local environment, and that they, as young people, especially young women, can be powerful in this situation. And they ended up sort of spreading the word about conserving the forests and the ecosystem to 300,000 young people across the country. And they also decided to, instead of cut down the trees for charcoal, they created a big project of beekeeping, over 3,500 hectares of forest being saved instead of cut down, and have created honey that is very popular in the local supermarkets and is marketable externally. And that's along with other, internationally, and that's, along with other products that they're also producing. And that was a Scottish government massive project helping 2,000 households. So it can happen on that scale as well. And I better stop because I think that's my 10 minutes up, but I could talk all day about it. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you for interrupting yourself, because I was really not wanting to interrupt you. The good thing is that we'll have an opportunity to learn more about this amazing work you're doing. I think the 31st of May, is that right, Noemi, or sometime around that?
Yes, Jan will go into more detail about our EDEs for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, so we'll have a full session dedicated to this amazing education programs, which thank you for showing the link how the personal transformation, the land transformation can actually trigger transformation at the family level, at the community level, and actually at the global level, because you're really showing us how these are spreading across the world thanks to your work. So thank you. And part of the goal of this session is to help amplify it further by helping others bring this into your own work. So fantastic. Thanks, Sally. And I'm really pleased to now hand over to Genzo Yamamoto from Opportunity International, who's going to tell us more about holistic development training, which just the name makes me very curious. So I won't say more. And Genzo, can you tell us that story? Yours, a little bit about yourself maybe, and what you want to share about this very inspiring training.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present. I work as the Director of Knowledge Management for an international NGO called Opportunity International. And what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about our journey to a particular training. Of course, many organizations have many trainings and we're no different, but we began to develop a particular kind of training. And I wanted to kind of share with you some of the research, the background principles, where we landed, and how the program has developed. I thought it would be more interesting if we cover a lot of ground, so I'm actually going to try to go fast. And I think the deck can be made available to you afterwards. So just kind of listen, and I will simply go fast. If I go fast enough, I may be able to play a video. We'll see. The organization is dedicated to alleviating poverty through financial services. So originally, we were focused on microfinance. Today, we're a little bit more sector-based. And so we focus on certain sectors. But one of the things that we realized is that addressing poverty is a multidimensional thing. And one of the things about Opportunity is that the original founders were Christians, and there's no religious requirement for employment, and Opportunity does not discriminate with regard to services that we provide. But there is a clear historical resonance with following Christ's mandate to love and serve the poor. Opportunity is not a proselytizing organization. So there is no explicit religious teaching of any kind that we're involved in. And I realize that this may not completely explicitly connect to food systems, but we do engage farmers rather intensively. So I hope you'll be able to sense how this can be useful for this discussion. But one of the key things is that we found that addressing poverty isn't just about putting money in the pocket, that the problem was multidimensional. And one of the very powerful concepts embedded actually throughout Christian scriptures, although not many Christians focus on it, is the concept of shalom. The English translation is peace, but the English word doesn't actually capture this, because in English it tends to simply say lack of conflict. But actually, the biblical concept suggests rich, joyful relationships across all relationships, with God, with self, with fellows, with nature. This sounds very similar to the 4 dimensions that Sally just mentioned. So you could depict it a little bit like this, that we are called to bring well-being across all of these dimensions. And there is a more secular way to speak about this. For sometimes when it's difficult to get into the concept, I simply just say, well, maybe we can break it down to human, social, physical, and spiritual capital. But of course, you lose something because you don't have the emphasis on joyful, full, fulfilling relationship. But then as we looked at all the clients we have in multiple countries, Opportunity serves in 30 different countries. But we brought 4 different country teams together, and we realized that there were similarities in needs. And we ended up saying, perhaps we could break it down into 6 areas where trainings could occur, different dimensions of well-being. And then this, of course, aligns to some extent with the thinking that all of you would be aware of, about multidimensional poverty that Amartya Sen started talking about back in the 1980s. And even today, there's the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard that speaks to things like that. Some of you also may be aware of how in the last 10 years, there's been discussions about how international trainings in international development are not always effective. What works and what doesn't work. So we did a research on that to say, it's not that we cannot throw training out, but we need to understand what helps. And so we clearly figured out what it was in the old approaches that were not effective and what we need to turn to. There's, again, please don't bother reading all this, but there are rigorous studies that sometimes that will show. I think there was a study done in Mexico that showed that actually teaching hope, how to have hope by itself, could actually make a huge difference in poverty levels. So it begins to show that we need to rethink training. And spirituality is part of it, right? This quote talks about how often in development literature and development practice, often pushed by the West and the North, actually avoids engaging in the issue of spirituality, but it leads to less effective results. And the recent push in human-centered design also talks about how we come up with all sorts of ways to force people to change behavior from the outside. But if you can impact people from within, then actually behavior change is more possible. This cartoon is a funny cartoon where two executives of a food company is looking at the thinking of a consumer, and they can't figure out why their brand of pickles doesn't show up in their consumers' brains, because they are thinking too institutionally. They're not engaging the actual lives of their consumers. Of course, if you look at theories of adult education, you know that actually there are many different theories, but in fact, they all end up agreeing that you cannot actually teach adults in the same way that we teach children, or even adults in universities. Adults, basically, to put it short, adults hate to change. And we need to think about how behavior actually changes among adults. So we start with foundations, and there are values that we think are important. And then we step into all these different dimensions of life, and all of these have values that are connected to that. And each of these modules, we've picked out what we thought were 4 key ideas that would start them on their journey. It doesn't try to be comprehensive. It simply tries to get them started. And of course, connection to the environment is part of that as well. I've drawn arrows, but it actually doesn't have to go in this order. Every discussion session has components that are carefully planned to help people reflect and then move toward attitude, skills, and behavior change. A key portion of every session is telling a story of real lives facing real challenges, told in a way that captures both emotions as well as the mind. And then toward the end of the session, there are moments that can ground some of these ideas that were discussed in larger value traditions. Now that could be, in our case, we work in areas where there are Christians, Muslims, but we've provided opportunities, and trainers and training teams can choose what they want to connect it to. This is just an example, since this is connecting to societies and cultures where we tend to work. And there's a different philosophy of delivery. Instead of the teacher-student approach, which many of us would be familiar with, the facilitator recognizes everyone has something to learn and teach, tries to gather their experiences, encourages participation, and then tries to bring it all together so that the decision that is made at the very end is led by the group, not by the trainer, not by the facilitator. So in the end, we want participants to own their own development. And then there are rich materials that go with this material. All right, is my time up? I think my time is up.
I mean, it's up enough that it would be difficult to do justice to the video, which I think is 5-6 minutes.
Sure.
Knowing
So,
you will be sharing it so people can watch it.
Sure. So yeah, so that's a quick overview of how we have traveled a particular journey, I suppose, to create a training program called Pathways to Wellbeing. As you've already heard, what is at the heart of every discussion session is a story. Not that the story itself doesn't provide the lesson, but it's a spark for conversation. And we've found that we're now testing it in 3 different countries: Ghana, Malawi, Colombia. And we have found that people are responding quite well to the stories. They remember the stories quite vividly and talk about these stories afterwards. And these are real stories. And what I have done is I've sent to COFSA an example story, which if there had been time, I would have shown, but it was called Discovering Purpose and Vision for My Life, a story coming out of Malawi. So I would love to invite you all to take a look at that story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Genzo, and not only to be bringing out these stories as individual cases, but the whole methodology that others here on the call can be inspired by and used. So amazing. I'm starting to feel quite regenerated myself, and I think we're going to have even more of that with Pavel, who's the director of Schumacher College. Some of us from the COFSA community were in the strategic retreat a couple of weeks ago, hosted by the amazing Dartington Trust Estate, and we witnessed some of the regeneration that's happening in Schumacher College at all levels, the land, but also the people, and fostering a whole generation of holistic thinkers and change agents. So Pavel, please tell us more.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlotte. And it's wonderful to see everybody here. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days to join. So I was struck just very quickly by Genzo. You shared, I tried to read all of the words on that slide, sorry. But the multiple pathways to human flourishing, I absolutely love that line, because that very much speaks to the head, heart, and hands model that is at the heart of Schumacher pedagogy and Schumacher community learning. So I'd love to have more conversations around that. But we were also invited to tell a little bit of sort of our story of regeneration, and I want to spend a couple of minutes on that and talk a little bit about Schumacher College and Dartington Trust, and then Noemi is going to share some slides of the collaborative project that we're doing with COFSA on the Local Leadership for Regenerative Food Systems project. So I want to explain a little bit more about that. But effectively, so I'm head of Schumacher College, but also the director of learning and land at Dartington Trust. Schumacher is in Southwest Devon in England. We're about 10 miles from the coast, and probably 10 kilometers from the coast, really, and 10 kilometers from the largest national park in southern England. Schumacher College has now celebrated its 32nd anniversary. It's going by quite quickly. And it was really developed to look at the intersection of sort of ecology and economics and holistic science and regenerative practices by using a community learning model. And really, it's founded by Satish Kumar, who actually just had lunch with before this call. And we were talking again about the sort of importance of bringing together all three elements of the sort of whole human experience and learning, sort of the head, the heart, and the hands. So during the process of, we run 8 different master's programs, an undergraduate program, and dozens of unaccredited short courses, that take place both on the estate, online, in partnership with others. And they range everything from, ecological design through to, not that these are antipodes, but through to, regenerative food systems and regenerative food farming and enterprise and programs like that. And more, we find that our students are interested in, and the curriculum is more focused on, explicitly food and farming systems, and trying to really draw that connection between soil health and community health in sort of a truly regenerative process. And we're fortunate to be on a beautiful rural estate. I'm looking at acres of green outside my window here, in the rain, of course, it being South Devon in England. But we have 25 land-based tenants and partners on the estate, and 100 other tenancies. And it's effectively a small village that is perhaps could be more fully integrated, but there's some really very interesting regenerative regenerative food systems processes happening on the estate, both in terms of education, in terms of food production, relocalization projects with heritage grain that bring together community members, and where your food miles are effectively 1 kilometer from where the grain is grown to where the bread is purchased and baked, and purchased. And our students engage with as much of that as possible. So in our master's and undergraduate programs, and are currently running agroecology residency program where students are on site for 6 months, learning about regenerative farming, various different techniques, as well as helping to produce food, which in pre-pandemic years, we were able to produce about 50% of what the students consumed here. And all of the students participate at least somewhat in the cultivation of the food, the harvesting, the cooking of the food, the prepping of the food, and the clearing up afterwards. So it really is a whole community approach to learning, which effectively spills the learning outside the walls of the classroom. And I noticed there's some of our alumni here on the call who have actually been working with COFSA and helping to develop some of the broader global networks. And one of the reasons that I came to Schumacher 4 years ago was exactly that. The sort of strength of the global network and the sort of transformative learning capacity of a whole sort of head, heart, and hands model of learning here. So as part of that developing of a global network and transformative learning, I come back to, we teach a lot about complexity in many of our courses, and in complexity, emerges beauty very often. Sometimes it's quite messy to get there. And whether that's development of a small community of 100 students or a community of 1,000, or actually the global community that we're sharing here on this call, and that's part of the Local Leadership for Regenerative Food Systems Network. So I don't know if you want to pop up that first slide, that would be really helpful. Just to sort of talk a little bit through that project that we've been working on now for about 18 months. And just to move us through some of those slides, just very quickly, so we don't have a tremendous amount of time. Can you go back to not that quickly. Sorry, can you go back to the first slide with the text on it? Just to say, the mission of this, or creating a global network of local hubs that we've been cultivating, is really developing a ground up equitable exchange of knowledge and experience across, as it says, local centers offering some connection with consciousness and food learning to help with site-based learning and sort of transformative embodied experiential engagement of food systems and of farming in places across the world. So to really develop this global network of localized hubs, and then with the next slide, we can see examples. We've had some learning sessions over the last year. There are a couple of examples. I think we've had 3 or 4 of those where we've begun to develop a ground-up curriculum based on the experience and the practices and expertise and sort of practical connections that some of our network partners have, in places like Peru and Colombia, and Thailand and India and South Africa and elsewhere. So we can continue with the slides. And just to give an overview of what that process is like, the objectives really are to develop the inner capacities, as it says here, to build regenerative conscious food systems at the grassroots sites around the world. So what's been important to us in developing this project is working on what I've been describing as a global distributed learning model, which doesn't centralize, but actually distributes, sort of beyond decentralization, but distributes ownership, capacity, and development in a very organic way of the curriculum process to the individual partners. So there's no sense of sort of centralized ownership, but effectively, as the first slide suggested, an equitable exchange of that experience across the network that can really help all of the participants. And then in the final slide in this section, we just have an overview of some of the focused areas that we've been looking at, and we can make this available as well. But based on thus far the experience and expertise of the participants, these are the sort of modular areas that we've been looking at building out. And then there will be access to that curriculum from any one of the network hubs or from people outside that want to participate and really help to actually build this as we move forward. So thanks, Naomi. I'm not sure where we are at the time because I'm not a very good timekeeper, but if there was a chance to show just another quick screen share, Charlotte?
Yes, go ahead. You have about 2 minutes. Perfect.
2 minutes, that's shed loads of time,
Yeah.
as one would say. So I just wanted to share, one of the folks that's been working with us on this has used I think it's a great tool called Graph Commons. I think it's just useful as we're talking about networks. See, all of the green dots there are partners who have participated in one way or another. And so I might actually look at, looking very quickly for Siendo Naturaleza, which is right here. And we've got a couple folks on the call. So this just allows you to pinpoint, an organization and some of their expertise and what they might be able to offer. So we can look at the different ones that are connected to different areas. And I know that it's a little bit out of scale here, and Schumacher Sprouts in Belgium and so on. And you can also go on and see, well, who teaches these particular areas? So as we're developing a curriculum, this is a really helpful tool for us to be able to visualize, and we can, again, make access to this available at some point. It's still in a bit of a draft form, but just to be able to demonstrate both to the partners and to ourselves where the strengths of the network lie, what the opportunities are, and how people can actually help contribute to the development of the curriculum. Thank you.
Wow, super rich and super efficient time-wise. Thank you, Pavel. And, we started with the image of the forest with Jan, and the image that was already present with me then, but is kept growing, is that of mycelia that are connecting all the trees and transferring knowledge. And we've just heard 3 examples of where experiential, holistic learning is fertilizing and seeding opportunities for more regeneration around the world. So it's truly inspiring to listen to all of you. I'd like us now to, just open up the floor and hear if you have questions or reactions to some of the presentations that have been made, or maybe some very short snippets of your own experience. Bearing in mind, we'll have a time to go in group chat in about 5-10 minutes, and the smaller group conversations can be another space to go in greater depth and share a little bit more. But feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to take the floor. Don't be shy. Actually, I don't know, maybe if I can pinpoint, but I saw George and Eliane were popping up on Pavel's screen, so you could. But I also see now Alejandra. Please come in. Thank you. You were in Schumacher College, was that right?
Hello, Charlotte. Not me exactly, but 3 of my co-workers in Efecto Mariposa, and that I wanted to acknowledge that and to make it available for you. For us, it was a beautiful experience to get in touch with Schumacher. We started like creating Efecto Mariposa, and everything around Schumacher resonated with us. So in that sense, we traveled to London and then to Devon. And that has been a partnership for 13 years right now. And it's been incredible. The generosity, the possibility of working with the people down there to learn from them was absolutely beautiful. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. And I think you said mariposa, right? Butterflies. So perfect image. Again, the flower. And
yeah, the name comes exactly from this idea of you flipping your small and very tiny and very soft wings, and then creating this amount of changes around us. We've been working for 13 years, and that's what has happened.
Beautiful. Thank you. We are all called to come out of our cocoon. And we can do that many ways in our life, many times in our lifetime. I think, Jürgen, did you have a question for Sally? Did I catch that right?
Yes, thank you so much, Naomi and Thomas, for bringing this beautiful group together. It's very inspiring, and but also very real with these practical examples. Regarding Sally, I was really wondering, it was very interesting to hear how you say everything starts with the inner shift first. Hence, I think this is where what you call the worldview pillar. I have been researching the role of mindsets now for a couple of years, And it seems to become a bit of a buzzword, increasingly being used, including even the UN Secretary General Guterres mentioned that everything starts with mindsets. But I'm wondering if you could give maybe 1 or 2 pointers how you see what typically can trigger or assist this change of worldview or mindsets. I think in your case, it was this travel experience, being exposed to a completely different culture. In my personal case, it was a motorbike accident, but I would hope it doesn't always need such a dramatic event. Maybe would you have 1 or 2 tips how to assist this needed change of worldviews or mindsets?
Thank you, Jürgen. Yeah, it's such a good point, because there are so many different ways for it to happen, and also depending on the local bioregion, wherever anybody is, and the culture there. But I can give you lots of different examples of worldview approaches that people take. Like I mentioned before, for Om and for lots of people who work in the network in Thailand, it's very much about meditation and yoga and that form of spirituality, and it can equally be other religions and other spiritual paths. For other people, it makes me think of the Estonian partners we have. It's very much about being in nature as much as possible, and that just there is something about just the physical being in nature without necessarily any overt spirituality that is the worldview shift approach that's taken. A lot of people in the West are enjoying, for example, a program, a course we're running in partnership with Jeremy Lent, who's really speaking a lot to people in this sort of Western scientific mindset, and talking about the separation that happened historically in the West in particular, and comparing that with maybe what happened in more Eastern traditions, and how we lost our sense of a holistic perspective. And that intellectual journey is the way that some people can shift their worldview. But there are myriad ways, which is why, and we would never want to diagnose how a worldview should shift, because we work with partners all over the world, who are running the EDEs now that we certify, and it's for them to decide how that happens, because they know their local area. But it's basically always the common thread is you're somehow reconnecting to yourself again, to each other, and to the natural world that we're part of. Does that? Maybe Jan could add more, maybe, I'm not sure, but that's my initial answer.
Thanks, Sally. I think Jan is no longer.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still there.
You're still here.
Perfect. Wonderful. Yes, it's 5 more minutes, I think. Go ahead. If you want.
When I heard the question, I was really looking forward, because I love it. I find the one of the dimensions that is more most inspiring for me, like especially when we take EDs or even in our online courses. It takes us to like many journeys, and I loved Sally's answer. But I just want to add that some people call that dimension cultural dimension, or others call spiritual dimension. So I think that is also part of an answer somehow, because it shows that, like our cultural background says a lot about our worldview, as well as what spirituality means to us, which is this invisible realm that somehow motivates our life, So just wanted to add that before I leave. Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And so I'm tempted, if that's okay, because I actually think, thank you, Jürgen, for that question, because I think it's one that merits going deeper into reflections about this, and the small groups could be a very nice space for that, because what COFSA is trying to do is accelerate the changes in food systems for regeneration and more equity and more justice and so on. And a big part of that is changing mindsets. I often like to also think of heart sets, and the question we face with is, how can we help the mindset shift in consumers, in producers, in policymakers, in supermarket managers, in food processors, so that their work contributes to more regenerative food systems. And a question for us is, what can we do about it? So maybe in the group work, you can discuss that. What can we do? I mean, and by we, I mean the collective we of COFSA, but also the individual we's, each of you in your own networks, already doing amazing work, but how can it be amplified? And in that, you might ask yourself, what is it that would make it easier for us? What can support us? What can make our work easier? But also what expertise, what initiatives, what methodologies already exist that we can draw from, that we can share. One of the things we're trying to do with COFSA step by step is build up, this library of resources that you can all draw from and enrich over the years. So please take that time. We'll have about 10 minutes, if that's okay. I'm just checking my time share, about 10, 12 minutes. How much exactly? Yeah. Let's do 10 minutes in your group work, in your groups, and to share that. How can we accelerate mindset and heart set shifts in food systems amongst all the stakeholders, and how can we support each other?
Yeah, we'll post, thank you, Charlotte. We'll post the question in the chat, and really focusing today on the question of change at the local level, in local communities and cultures, as discussed with our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, because that's something I'm taking from all three presentations, is the shift from outer in to inner out, and from top down to bottom up. So we have to be really regenerating on the ground, and lots of grounds make a whole world. So thank you for that. And Noemi's gonna zap us into some breakout rooms, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Yay. I'm sure you were all frustrated by being cut off. But please do exchange your email addresses in the private or general chat and stay in touch and continue the conversation also outside this room. Yes, we were talking about the power of storytelling and connecting to the persons and the landscapes behind each story and the values, and also very innovative programs that are being piloted to try to bring in more of this work on mindsets, heart sets, and consciousness into the food systems work. Any highlights you'd like to bring to the conversation, please type in the chat anything you'd like to share, because we're going to be saving the chat. So if it's maybe a training program you're working on and you want to invite people to register or to share the word, or some cool idea or aha moment you had in your group, you can raise your hand. You can also type it in the chat. We have about 7 minutes before we kind of slowly start wrapping up.
I'll just make a quick comment.
Yeah.
So we had I think a interesting conversation grappling with the complexity of the question. But one point that came out for me was shifting mindsets. It is very difficult, particularly when people have been rooted in a particular way of working in a mindset for many, many years. But sometimes there are structures, incentives, and frameworks that can shift behaviors. And by sort of engaging in behaviors that actually shift somebody's perspective and mindset, is one way that we discuss this in the session. So, rather than aiming at, let's shift somebody's consciousness initially, let's shift behaviors, in farming in particular, and then that may well yield to or lead to some changed perspectives.
It's interesting. So it's really showing it's iterative. It's an iterative process. Very rich. Any other interesting insights that you thought like, oh, that's rich. Let me bring it back to the group like Pavel just did. I'm not afraid of silence, so I'm gonna stay silent.
Matthew is having his hand raised.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yes, thank
Hi,
you, Matthew. Go ahead. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Charlotte. I'm still touched with the idea of letting the plants do the talking, and this comes from my work with exploring how to measure food quality. So I've done lots of comparative testing where I can measure and also demonstrate differences in taste. And for someone to taste an amazingly grown carrot compared to a carrot that's not amazingly grown, they are worlds apart. And it's not the human speaking, it's the carrot speaking. So what I mean by this is, you know, allowing the plants to do the talking. They're going to communicate a whole lot of information that we just can't, we couldn't go there. And so that's the sort of project that I'm involved with, growing real food for nutrition and exploring that through citizen science. So yeah, I was just sharing that. So allow the plants to do the talking.
Brilliant. And Matthew, if you have a web link you can share in the chat about this citizen science, you know, I'm sure many might be interested to join in. And also, you know, when you talk, I had an experience when we were in Dartington for the retreat of having wild garlic speak to me while eating mindfully a wild garlic soup. Guided by Toma, and we'll do some of that mindful eating practice and mindfulness in the next consciousness practice session next month, which Noemi will tell us more about. So many ways to have plants, and just one beautiful idea. I can't remember where I read this, but a young man from an indigenous people saying, "Oh, I know all the plants' names, but I don't know their song yet." Oh, imagine! Beautiful. Any other interesting insights that came from your chat? And I also just do monitor what's being popped up in the chat here. Like Emma is hosting a 3-day immersive learning journey in 42 acres in June in the UK to shift mind and heart sets. And you can find out more about it there. It's open for registration. You've got Jürgen's blog. Make sure not to miss that. And also Blue Food work, I see. And then, yeah. Any other thoughts? No? Yes, Dominic. Greetings.
Yeah. Thank you. In our group chat, we made a lot of progress on the food system. Yes, we spoke about regenerative nature of some crops that can be very valuable to the local communities. So in the context of Africa, Nigeria, which the socio-economic status of the farmers are very low, we spoke about some legume crops that can fund the system and change the farmers and economic status, because these legume crops can create a biodiversity within. They are the crops that are regenerative in nature. And when this when farmers dwells on it, it helps the soil, that is the biodiversity, the habitats, and the agroecology. These farmers, you know, they lack money. They don't have money for even fertilizer. And when they plant these crops add some nutrient in the soil. And then instead of them to go for fertilizer, these crops can then help to nourish the soil, and the crops itself can take up the fertilizer, make use of it. And I mentioned such crops, especially their legumes. And in Nigeria here, we have their common one like peanuts, we have the soya beans, we have the bambara nut. They are all regenerative in nature because they even capture nitrogen from the atmosphere. And when they capture it, it helps to even reduce the global warming and climate change, because nitrogen is one of the gases contributing to global warming as well. So this crops dwells on such to fix the fertilizer by itself. And it's very interesting that such crops, as I have mentioned, they are very proteinous in nature. So most of the women and children, especially in Africa, they are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to a situation that even to find meat, and they have a good protein in the body is sometimes very difficult. But when it depends on such crops like this, it can replace the needed protein that they could go for meat. And you know, when they go for meat, they go bush hunting practically. So this bush hunting, in the process, they burn out the bush, they uproot the trees, and the rest of it. Thank you. This is what we discuss in the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. That was really a very, very important story that I think illustrates beautifully at the very, very practical, ecological, agricultural level, some of the holistic approach that Genzo, Sally, and Pavel were talking about. And Zheng, thank you for showing all the connections from the soil to our food, to the forest, via the animals. So yes, with that, I would like to make sure we're going to save the chat and Noemi will share some resources, but if you want to save the chat now to not lose all these references, you can go to the bottom of your chat. Next to the little smiley face, you'll see 3 little dots. When you press on that, you see that you can save the chat and that will go into your files somewhere, I think under a Zoom calendar, and that's where you can have all the chat content. With that, I thank you very warmly and hand over to our wonderful architect of these sessions, I think Noemi, or is it Alice, one of you, Noemi? So thanks for putting the session together, Noemi. Noemi is actually very embodying this. She's in Gaia education program since this morning. So over to you, Noemi.
Exactly. So I'm Noemi. I'm the community manager of the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. And just yesterday, I started my first EDE course. So Eco-Village Design Education Curriculum with Gaia. Actually is the first She EDU course, just focusing on women empowerment and women ancestrality. So I'm very happy to be here. So yes, I'm the community manager of Conscious Food Systems Alliance, which is an alliance convened by UNDP, a movement of food and agriculture and consciousness practitioners that are united around a common goal, which is to support people from across food and agriculture systems to cultivate inner capacities that activate systemic change and regeneration. And now I just present the calendar of events that we are hosting until December 2023. So every month we offer either a consciousness practice or a collective inquiry session like the one of today. So during the collective inquiry session, we will put an emphasis on identification of existing initiatives and methodologies and tools that have been proven to be positive and successful. And we will then see if there are other opportunities for adaptation and replication in that session. So we will have in-depth session for Gaia Eco-Village Design Education Curriculum on the 31st of May. And as well, we will have an in-depth session on holistic development training by Genzo and Opportunity International in June. Regarding the consciousness practices, we will offer to those that are intended to deepen their understanding and application of various practices that can be leveraged for food systems transformation. And also during the session, we will take the opportunity to really experience together and practice together collectively. So the next session, the next slide is on mindfulness. So we will have the presentation by Gelong Tupten, who is a Buddhist monk and author. So with him, we will explore the fundamentals of mindfulness. He will also lead a practice together. Then we will see how this practice, mindfulness, can be applied to food systems through mindful eating practice that will be led by Vera, Salvo, and Waverly Nuremberg, that are today with us, that are both mindful eating experts. And then we will see also how mindfulness can be applied to the farming and agriculture with Michael McVoy, who is the farm manager of the Plum Village Happy Farm project. So very happy to have this session. And we also would like participants to have the opportunity to reflect with their own experience with mindfulness and how this practice can really support their work in transforming food systems. And of course, as always, you need to register on Zoom. It will be on the 23rd of May, same time of today. So yes, and here is like join the movement. So we have an application form that is open if you want to become a core member of the Alliance. So just put all those links in the chat. And I've seen there is a question coming in.
Okay. Hi, I know we're wrapping up. I just had a question about on the email regarding this session. There was a concept note that was attached and mention about creating groups, action groups to collaborate on the curriculum. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a bit and what are the next steps to get involved in that?
Okay, so you mean the curriculum with Pavel, the Schumacher College curriculum, right? Okay, so regarding this curriculum, we still need to figure out a clear next step on this. But of course, we will share, I think starting at the end of June would be the period where July would be the period where we make circulate the curriculum, and really you will get the chance to get on board and collaborate with us on this. So at the moment, we are still finalizing few details, and then we will get back to you around end of June. This is more or less the time frame.
Indeed, thank you, Noemi. Indeed, we will. This was just the launch of a collective inquiry process on this question of conscious local communities and cultures, and we will unpack. That was more to provide the inspiration to call people interested to come together. And we will follow up, as we said, with in-depth session, the first one on May 31st to go deeper into the Gaia education program, another one at the end of June, probably with Genzo. And then we will also invite you to those interested to be part of this curriculum with Schumacher College. We are taking the first steps to establish the process and the basis for this discussion, and we will invite you to be part of the design of this curriculum. So and we invite you also to follow. So we have created on our digital platform for those of you that are COFSA members, and if you're not, we invite you also to register very quickly to become COFSA member and access our platform. So we hope to have follow the discussions there on this agenda. And as Noemi said, this was the first collective inquiry on one area of intervention, and we will every 2 months we will start the discussion on other areas. The next one should be probably at the beginning of July on the issue of farmers' psychological resilience. We think that's also a very important subject, and we will proceed like that every 2 months to unpack and start to see how we can collaborate on these different entry points for food systems transformation through our work on consciousness. So I hope you enjoy this session. We look forward to continue this conversation with you, and hope you'll share the inspiration you have received today with many others, and we'll grow together this movement. Thank you all. Have a great day, evening, night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.